Hey, what is up? It's Dr. Vibe here speaking. You are blessed and highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. I am your host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show. I'm also your host and co-producer of monthly Google Hangouts at the Good Men Project, one of the most viewed men's websites in the world, averaging between 2 to 3 million page views a week. If you want to touch base with me during our conversation tonight, you can hit me up at Twitter at DRVIBESHOW. And the gentleman we have on tonight is, man, I call him the most plugged-in social media guy when it comes to lawyers that I know. If you go to Google Plus and check out his site, man, he's posting at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things a day on his Google Plus site, and he's become a friend of the show in a very short space of time, and you'll find out why if you check this out tonight. But we have Kenneth L. Foote, Esquire, lawyer in the state of Florida. He'll give a little bit of background about himself tonight. Then we're going to kick it back and have a really good open discussion about blacks and the law, especially from a black American perspective tonight. So, Ken, thanks so much for making time to share with us tonight.
Doctor, it's good to be with you again. The last time we had a blast when we were here. All of our listeners are just loving your show, and so
Thank you.
Good to have the opportunity to be back with you. We greet you from Tampa, Florida, where it's not snowing right now, although we had a little rain.
Okay. Oh, yeah, punish me, man. A little rain.
Well, I think it was
My goodness. What's the temperature in Tampa?
I was going to give it to you. I think it's about 73, 74, so a little chilly tonight, but we're dealing with it.
Oh. You're hurting me, man. You were born in You don't deserve to go back to Brooklyn with that kind of punishment, brother.
Yes, that is true. Born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, New York City.
Yeah.
A transplant down here to Florida, and we're still representing in New York City, of course. That's where all my people are. That's where my roots are. But we're down here in Florida, and we're glad to be with Dr. Vibe tonight.
Excellent. Let me ask, especially in light of the trials of Jordan Davis, trials of Trayvon Martin, you being a black man in the legal profession, and we're just going to kick it back. What is the first thing that comes to you in your mind when I say to you, what do you have to say about blacks in the law?
Well, I mean, obviously, what comes out is that the obvious that there is a disparity in how blacks are prosecuted and the sentences that they receive in various parts of the country. So obviously I'm here in Florida right now, and this could vary from state to state, but in the South it has been historically known for disparity in sentences and what blacks receive as far as incarceration and punishment. In general, though, we still have problems, as I've said on a variety of shows in the past, that there are some disparities as to how blacks are treated, but it depends on where you are, and the whole thought of with the Trayvon Martin and the Jordan Davis cases that have gone on, that there must be some unfair treatment of blacks. And historically, we know that's true. That's statistics that are out there. However, in more recent days with the media, some of the more noted cases have received more attention, and we are in this kind of area where race is being brought up once again, and obviously that has, some effect on what people think as far as the justice system. So I think we could talk about that a little bit tonight. I'm just giving my opinion of what I've seen from New York to Florida, what the differences are, and we'll see if we can talk about that, discuss it a little bit, hopefully give some helping points to some of our brothers and sisters that are out there that may become involved in the criminal justice system.
I want to actually circle back because in our conversations we've had online and offline, what made you get involved in the criminal justice system?
Well, I mean, from becoming a lawyer, I've had a few careers. I was involved with the police department in New York back in the 80s, and had an interest in the law in the 90s, and went to school, started my education at St. John's University in Queens, New York, so we give that shout out to Queens. and finish up here in Florida at Stetson University College of Law. I thought that I was going for constitutional law, and as most law students, when they go in, they think they're going to do one thing, and then you come out and doing something else. So I started my legal career in the prosecutor's office or the district attorney's office down here in Clearwater, Florida. Most of the times you go into that because you want trial practice, and as most people don't know, every lawyer doesn't go to court. Actually, almost 90% of lawyers actually do transactional work, where the remainder do what we call litigation. And litigation are those attorneys that actually go to court. And half of that is civil, car crashes and things like that, divorces. And then the remainder of that is criminal litigation. And I found it exciting. I went into it as a young prosecutor and was excited about being in the courtroom and seeking justice. And so back in 1999-2000, I started working in the courtroom as a criminal prosecutor. And currently I'm a criminal defense attorney in the Tampa Bay area with an office that was, I guess, founded in 2004 or so. So about 14, let's see, count through the math, about 10 years ago. That's how long we've been doing criminal defense work in the courtroom.
When you decided to go into criminal law, what was the feedback amongst your peers, your friends, your family?
Well, that's what they know lawyers for. All the TV shows that are out there, people familiar with attorneys being in the courtroom. And so people are kind of familiar with that, although it's different in real life than being on one of the shows that you can do a murder case from start to finish in 45 minutes with commercials. In real life, it takes a little bit longer than that, but I've done both sides of it, prosecution and defense, and people support you. There's always lawyer jokes that are out there, but when someone's in trouble and they contact you, obviously my foremost concern is taking care of that person that needs that help. And that's one of the rights that we enjoy here, and one of the freedoms we enjoy here under the Constitution, is that every person is deserving of a defense. And I enjoy that. Not because I'm pro-prosecution or pro-defense, I'm pro-constitution. I like the process. I like to ensure that everyone has their day in court and that every person has a right to a vigorous defense when accused of a crime by the government.
So let's get into some meat here in regards to what some things blacks need to know about the law from your experiences, from being a part of policing to being a lawyer. What are, let's start kicking it back and find out what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind, like what's one thing that blacks need to know about the law that they don't know, have you seen in your experiences?
Well, obviously there's a lot of stereotypes out there on both sides. From the non-black community, they believe that many of our young people, everyone that's out there, is out there committing a crime sometime. And that's not the majority of people, but there are some few people that are out there, depending on how you dress, what music you're listening to, who you're hanging out with, that you might be up to some, no good or a crime. On the other side, from the community, there are that small minority that believe that every person who's Caucasian or wears a badge or uniform are out to get young people, and that's not necessarily true as well. There's extremes on both sides with regard to how both sides perceive each other. Okay, and I think with me, I'm both. My parents, as I spoke to you, I'm product of an interracial marriage. My father was Irish. My mom, African American from Spartanburg, South Carolina. And so growing up, they were married in the 60s, growing up in the 70s and the 80s. I've seen both sides, and I've been involved with both sides, and I'm aware of the stereotypes of both sides. And so my interest pretty much is to start a dialogue and a discussion with regard to the differences that we have and the misconceptions that we have with regard to racial differences and biases in this country.
So when you're talking about some of these stereotypes and biases, how's that had an effect on the justice system as it is carried out in American society today, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, to understand the criminal justice system, we have to look at history. When we were coming up, particularly in the South, juries who would make the decisions in criminal trials, most of them were made up of all men, and most of them were Caucasian. Blacks were not allowed to serve on juries, and until past the 1900s, women weren't allowed to be on juries, and so trials were supposed to be your case was decided by a jury of your peers. And if you can imagine, a black person being accused of a crime in a courtroom, looking over back, earlier in our history, there were either 6 or 12 white men that were going to make a decision about your future and the outcome of that case. And that wasn't necessarily a jury of your peers. And then women were included, and then more recently, of course, than everyone else, regardless of race. It has some effect when people have certain set stereotypes about a particular class of people, whether that's black, Hispanic, or anyone else. They bring into the courtroom and the deliberation room certain ideas about a particular set of people, a particular culture. And that has some effect on how people make a decision as to your guilt or innocence. In my experience, I've had well over 100 jury trials as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. Here in Florida, in the Tampa Bay area, I can honestly say that I very rarely have encountered, a jury that would look at one of my clients, whether white or black, and you can kind of feel that they decided it based on race. It's not necessarily true. I mean, juries usually get it right, and I know we've had some high-profile cases here in our country with regard to Trayvon Martin, Casey Anthony, Jordan Davis, and people are quick to jump to conclusions when they don't get the result that they want, that is probably, race-based. And that's not necessarily true as far as the jury is concerned. Okay? But, obviously, race plays a factor when people have certain misconceptions about particular cultures. And that's what I'm interested in talking about, starting that discussion so that people are more educated and informed about various cultures, whether it be black, Hispanic, or anyone else. We need to learn about each other so we can understand what our backgrounds are and bring that into the courtroom.
Well, since it is something that you're wanting to start a dialogue with, if you can, let's start a dialogue tonight about the whole issue of race in the criminal justice system. What's wrong or what's incorrect? What needs to be corrected? How can it be corrected? So, if you want to pick a conversation piece, certainly we'd like to start a discussion with you on that.
Well, some of the things that have been in the news lately are sentencing guidelines for particular crimes. So under the federal statutes, criminal statutes in the United States, there's been a lot of discussion lately with regard to drugs. So, for example, crack cocaine. Crack cocaine carries some stiff penalties in the federal justice system, wherein there are mandatory sentences for prison, depending on whether you possess crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. And traditionally, when crack came out in the 80s, it was believed that crack was in the urban communities and was possessed by pretty much minorities. So those sentences were much stiffer if you were found in possession of crack cocaine versus powder cocaine, which would be used by either whites or suburbanites or those that had professional careers. And recently, in our government, the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, and many others have been discussing changing those sentencing guidelines so that the sentences are commensurate with the actions. So a person that is in possession of powder cocaine versus a person that's in possession of crack cocaine, that they would get pretty much the same sentence, so that there is no disparity between the two. That's a big thing in the United States with regard to sentencing guidelines. We have something called minimum mandatory sentences depending on the crime, where, for example, if you, in Florida, gun laws, we have what we call 10-20 life. You know, if you have a gun on you when you commit a crime, you have a mandatory sentence of 10 years. If you pull that gun out, it's, you know, and fire it, is 20 years. If you injure or kill someone, it's 30 years to life. Minimum mandatory sentences actually take the discretion out of the judge's hands to be able to fashion a sentence based on the facts of that particular case. So when you have laws that say if you pull a gun out, you have to get 10 years, no matter what the judge thinks or what people hear, if you're convicted, you're going to get the 10 years no matter what. So that, with regard to gun laws, or whether it's drug cases or 3 strikes and you're out, those type of things seem to affect minorities more so than Caucasians in this country. And many believe that those laws were kind of fashioned and passed to have an effect on those people of color. So that's pretty much the first place to start, is sentencing. How do we deal with cases once a person is convicted? Is it fair that a person that has some crack cocaine on them should do a major mandatory sentence in federal prison, as opposed to a person that has powder cocaine on them?
With this discussion, I hope you get a chance to share a number of different areas of how blacks can better deal, or more knowledge about the law. Do we know, or do blacks know their rights, really and truly, in your opinion?
Well, in the United States, I mean, most people get their information from TV.
Right.
And as we know, that TV is not always accurate, whether it be the news or some type of show that's going on. So I don't know if, you know, up in Canada or anywhere else, but they have the show, you know, Cops. So you see cops.
It's on it. We get it up here. No worries.
Right. So you see people arresting people, and, you know, they read them their rights, and, you know, they're locking people up and putting them in police cars. But, you know, with regard to whether people know their rights, most people don't. They know the basics. If the police officer doesn't read me my rights, there's some type of penalty. But that's not necessarily always true. I mean, in the United States, police officers don't have to read you what we call your Miranda rights, unless they're going to ask you some questions and you happen to be detained. Okay? If they're going to arrest you anyway, because they either observed a crime or believe that you committed a crime, and they don't want to ask you about that to get a statement from you, they don't have to read you your rights. So in my practice, a lot of times I'll get clients, you know, the first thing they say is they didn't read me their rights. I said, well, they didn't have to read you your rights, depending on the type of case. Another big area is search and seizure. You know, what happens when you get pulled over in your car? What happens when a police officer comes to your house? Many times people, you know, a lot of people don't even know what your rights are. Can you refuse that? And most cases, yes. Unless you're under arrest, a police officer cannot go through your car or impound your car or search your car. If you're stopped for a traffic violation, the officer can only hold you as long as that traffic violation is going on. So if you're speeding, once he finishes writing the speeding ticket, you're free to go. But a lot of times the police will come up to you and say, listen, here's your ticket, or here's your warning if they don't give you a ticket, and say, is there anything in the car that I need to know about? And that's when we get into a situation, because many people don't know their rights. They're trying to be respectful, okay? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the officer gets access to your car. And that's where we have problems, where people don't know how far they can go, when they can say no, you know, what their attitude is towards the police. And that's when we get into a lot of cases where the police gain access to a vehicle where people don't know that they didn't have to get access to that vehicle.
With this whole area of rights and comparing media and all that, in your opinion, is the media hurting or a bad influence in regards to people or African Americans knowing their rights? Do they sort of get a little bit off base and people basically go into situations not equipped properly?
Well, my opinion, this is my humble opinion, with regard to the media, is that the media is there to sell ratings. They want to run shows. And right now, with the 24-hour news cycle and being under cable TV, people want to sensationalize a lot of cases that come up. And as I watch the news every night when I come in, and if I'm intimately familiar about a case and I know the facts of the case, I'm really surprised at how much they don't really do their homework and they just pull up the headline and get people excited. They get people going based on a headline and not really have a lot of facts. For example, here in Florida, obviously the biggest cases have been Trayvon Martin and Jordan Davis, and these are both two young men that whose lives were tragically cut down before their time by gunmen who were non-African American. So I've learned and I've observed that the media sometimes sensationalizes things that, yes, this is a tragic death, but they automatically jump to the conclusion that this must be race-based. Okay, and so people, they get all riled up based on what they see on national TV. And just last Sunday, I was on a radio show on Hot 97 in New York, and Jordan Davis's father was on there. And both this father and this mother of this young man, the amount of class, the amount of, how they are reserved in such a difficult time amazes me still. I mean, they have talked, and Mr. Davis stated even on last Sunday that he didn't jump to conclusions that this was race-based. He wanted to hear the facts about the case. And this is the father of this young man. And he listened and wanted to find out the evidence first before jumping to conclusions. So my issue is that sometimes, depending on the motive or the agenda of the particular, cable station or network that is putting the story out, it's either, something that's racially biased from one side or the other, without getting all the evidence and all the facts. And most listeners of the news stations that we have today don't know all the facts because the news stations don't give all the facts. And we get people riled up and they start going that, oh, this is automatically a race type situation, which sometimes creates problems because it puts people in their corners. And I'm about bringing people to the table to discuss the differences that we have between our cultures so that we can better understand them and possibly help prevent some of these situations in the future.
That's fair. What other areas about the law do you feel that Black Americans could be better equipped or have more knowledge of?
Well, a lot of stuff is common sense, Doctor. I mean, people have talked about, how you interact with the police. And,
very good point. Very good point. I want you to delve on this one.
Well, a lot of people, there are two schools of thought with regard to that. There's the common sense approach, and then there's the I shouldn't have to change who I am approach. And that's the one that usually gets you in trouble. That we should stand up, I shouldn't have to acquiesce, and change my behavior because I'm involved with the police. Well, there are a couple of thoughts about that. One, reality is that in being involved with the police department before, there are certain perceptions. All police are not out there to kill Black or Hispanic children. They're not out there to, have, misconceptions or misperceptions about different types of races. These officers want to get home. They have families. They want to get home after their shift. They don't want someone to pull a shotgun in their face when they pull a car over. And tragically, we've lost a lot of good police officers doing their job, and some person who, has a weapon on them and doesn't want to go to jail because of a warrant will shoot and kill a police officer. So that's one side of it. Then you have this minority of certain police officers who wear the uniform, definitely not all of them, but there are a few that have certain misconceptions in their heads that if you see 3 or 4 young Black men standing on the corner talking, they must be part of a gang, or they must be, starting, some idea to commit a crime. And that's an issue And so when you have these people, meet on a street for whatever it might be, whether it's to check out what they're doing or to pull a car over because the tag light is out, we have to address the differences of how police officers deal with particular people that they pull over. And it's just a fact of life that, a lot of times when police officers pull over a vehicle and there are, 3 or 4 African American males in that vehicle, sometimes they think that, okay, maybe they're up to something. On the other side, our young men have to be aware of their behavior when they're encountered, police encounter, them when they pull them over. How do you deal with them? Okay, well, turn your radio down, be respectful, put your hands in plain view, all right, and answer the officer's questions. Know your rights. The officers cannot just go through your car unless they have some reason to believe that you've committed a crime. And the most frequent thing for an officer to get into your car is that they smell marijuana. And this, as a criminal defense attorney, I'll tell you, I don't understand why people drive around smoking marijuana. If you're in a state where it's legal, I mean, okay, but again, you can't be impaired in driving a vehicle. I don't understand why, young men want to drive around in the car, and as soon as you open the window to talk to the officer, a cloud of smoke comes out and they smell marijuana. In Florida, if the officer smells marijuana, that is a reason for him to search the vehicle, and then the officer can go in there. They also can bring out canine dogs, and if the dog alerts that the dog smells drugs, that's a reason to go into the vehicle. So I think we got to use a little common sense when we're driving a vehicle. Probably not smoke marijuana or do things that are illegal right there in front of the officer's face. So that's just basic. That's not law school. That's not any special type of knowledge. That's what we call common sense.
With the blacks and dealing with the law, now in a situation like you said there, and let's take a situation where officer goes through a car without, in the person would think, a person without justifiable reason, what would be the next step after that happens? Can a person file a complaint saying that this was unlawfully done?
If the officer treated them unfairly?
Yes, like you were saying there. Okay, so take an example. I'm driving in Florida, and I get stopped, not smoking marijuana, not drinking, not all that sort of stuff. Officer goes through my car. Is that justifiable?
Unless you give them consent, they have no reason to go in through your car. But most people, when they get pulled over, and I mean, I'm a criminal defense attorney, when I see those lights in the back of my rearview mirror, your heart rate starts going a little bit because you have to start thinking, okay, the first thing is, all right, you got to pull over. Then you have to try to be safe because you don't want to provoke this officer. He has no clue of who you are. So he doesn't know if he's walking up on a person that just robbed a bank, a person that is emotionally unstable. The officer is walking up to a vehicle, and that's the most dangerous thing that police officers do is pull over vehicles. I mean, when they walk up to a vehicle, they have no idea when that window rolls down what they're going to experience. On the other hand of it, they have to have reason to go through your vehicle. So if you give them consent to go through your vehicle, they can go through it. If you're arrested for a reason, or if they have probable cause, like the example I gave you, marijuana. If a cloud of marijuana smoke comes out of your window when you open it, the police officer is going to go in your car, okay, at that time. What happens is that because people don't really know their rights, when they see that officer with a badge and a gun, they acquiesce and just, hey, whatever you want to do, officer, you want to look in the vehicle? And most of the time it starts with officers asking, is there anything I need to know about this car? Do you have anything in here that I need to know about? And so a lot of times people will stop, and because they're afraid, they'll go, yes, you can go ahead and look through my vehicle. And that's not, in the United States, that's not necessarily the law. The officer cannot just go through your vehicle. You either have to give him consent or he has to have a reason to go through the vehicle. And that's the thing that people have to be educated about their rights. Be respectful. When an officer stops you, be respectful. He is in control of that particular scene. There's a reason usually that they stop you. Okay, but officers are usually not going to violate your constitutional rights and start going through the vehicle. But if they can, they're going to ask you, hey, do you mind if I look through your vehicle? And most people will get nervous and say, well, yes. And the problem is, if you don't have anything in your vehicle, nothing's going to happen. It's the people that actually have something in their vehicle, but they're afraid, and they go ahead, you can search it, and then they find something in there. So the issue is that people have to know what their rights are. When can the government, through the police, actually enter your vehicle or your home? And most people don't know what it is, and I think we have to understand when you encounter law enforcement, especially for young black men, what should you do, okay, and how should you act? Because you got a nervous guy on the other side with a firearm, and then you're in the vehicle, you're nervous as well. And even if you're not doing anything wrong, you have to use some common sense. That's not the time to act up and show your civil rights and stand your ground and all that. Put your hands on the wheel, turn the interior light on so that officer can see your hands if it's at night, so that he knows everything is okay. And normally, most officers, when they see you, they're going to know who you are. They run the vehicle plate. They know if you're wanted for anything. And that exchange, pretty much 98% of the time, nothing happens. I mean, cops stop people all the time. But on the other side, you have some young men, not just saying black, Hispanic, whites as well. They've just committed a crime, or they have a suspended license, or that the license plate on their vehicle doesn't match the vehicle, or the vehicle is stolen. Well, then you're going to have a problem at that point, and the officer is going to find it out at some point, and that's when you're going to have, an interaction with the police, which may lead to your arrest.
So let's take a scenario that I'm sure you've had clients who have been arrested. What should they do if they are arrested and, for example, taken down to the station? How should they conduct themselves? Obviously, it should be respectfully, but if they do get questions asked of them by police officers, whether it's on the road or in a station, what procedures, what are the best practices for blacks in a situation like that?
Well, obviously, you got to be respectful, but what I hear from many of my clients is they talk too much. In the United States, when you hear the rights, you have the right to remain silent. Okay? I'm so surprised at people that don't remain silent. They start running their mouths. And a lot of times, they start telling stories, and they're not true, and the officers find that out pretty quickly that they're lying. When I watch some of the police shows, like Cops, they'll tell them, just tell me what's going on. Just tell me what's in the car. It'll go easier for you. And that's not true either. There's nothing going easier for you. If you show the police officer exactly where your drugs are, that just means you're going to jail quicker. So they have a job to do, and they befriend you and talk to you and say, look, just be upfront with me and tell me what's going on. What people need to understand is that you have a right to remain silent. Present your identification, your driver's license. Okay, if you want to give them consent, that's up to you. If there's no reason for them to go through the vehicle, and a lot of people don't understand, just say, look, I'm kind of on my way somewhere. Once they give you that ticket or that citation, or the reason that they initially stopped you is over, there's no other reason to hold you. And that's where people get confused. So they say, well, I don't want to be disrespectful. Now, I've seen a lot of comedy shows. I've seen a lot of movies and reality shows that tell us what is the difference between being pulled over when you're black and you're white. Well, not saying this is 100% true all across the board, but the white person can actually say, why are you stopping me? I have somewhere to go. Is there any other reason to hold me? And the police officer normally will, if there's no other reason, will let the person go. When you have minorities getting pulled over, the first thing they're thinking about, a lot of them, depending on where you are, is, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get pulled out of this vehicle? Is someone going to say they saw me reach for something? So we have to do a little bit extra. We have to do a little bit more than other people do. And not to say that that's right, but that's just our reality. And so for young black and Hispanic males, put your hands on the wheel. If you're not doing anything wrong, answer the officer's questions. But if there's no reason to go through your vehicle, then you have to know that the officer either has to have probable cause or a reason to arrest you to search your vehicle. And a lot of people get nervous and start saying, oh, okay, well, you can look in here and look in there. And the kind of crazy part that I don't understand is you already have drugs in the car. So why are you giving the officer permission to go through your car? That's one of the issues that is out there.
True. Where, like, how much knowledge on average do your clients have of their rights?
Oh, let me
Oh
tell you.
gosh. Oh, God. I heard the sigh. Okay, go for it.
Most of the time, it's what they learn either on TV or what their best friend told them. And normally, unless you went to law school and have a law degree or pretty much are versed in your constitutional rights, they don't know much about it. And the thing that I hear the most is, I want it to be honest, and the Constitution doesn't say anything about being honest. It says you have a right to remain silent. So my stance is anytime the government or police either come to your door or stop your vehicle, okay, no matter how nice that police officer is, that is the government coming to you. That is the full force of the government, whether that be a state or the country as a federal agent. That person is standing there, and you should know your rights. And not be militant about it. A lot of times people will shake their finger in an officer's face. That's not the time to kind of show, you know the law. But pretty much most officers will understand if you say, look, I really don't want to give consent to search my vehicle. There's nothing in here, but I have somewhere to go. Because an average search could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour. And in some places, they'll bring a dog out, to see if he smells any drugs. You can be on the side of the road for an hour. I've heard of stories where it's 2 to 3 hours. So you have a right that once the officer has finished his reason for pulling you over, whether that be speeding or you went through a stop sign, he has to let you go. So once he gives you that citation, he'll look at you and he'll start another thing. Is there anything I need to know about in the vehicle? You say no. Would you mind that I take a look at it? Can I go through your vehicle? And by that time, 3 or 4 more police cars are pulling up, and you're wondering what's going on, and now they're searching through your vehicle. And if you give them consent, they have a reason to go through your vehicle. And a lot of times, a lot of people acquiesce when they see that authority. They don't know their rights, and because there's 6 or 7 officers out there, they say, have at it, go through my car.
So they need a better education, and people like yourselves who are out there can give them that education. In regards to the justice system too in race, what do you feel about? And I use I guess you take the Jordan Davis case and Trayvon Martin case, the whole composition of juries and how they work, and how what blacks need to know about the jury system itself in America.
Well, the jury system, depending on where you are, okay, so it's different between New York and Florida and California. I can tell you about, Florida. The jury system, they either pick you off the voter rolls, or they simply, in Florida here, they pick you off of the driver's license rolls. If you have a driver's license, you can be summoned for jury duty, and that could be pretty much anybody. And when people come up for juries, the majority of those people that show up for jury duty, first of all, they don't want to be there. No one wants to serve on jury duty. They find reasons to get out of it. But the jury system is very important, because this is where we get our common sense people who are working in a hardware store, they're working in Walmart or McDonald's, or they're a doctor, or they're driving a truck, or whatever it is that they do. These are common sense people that come in and hear a set of facts and make a decision as to whether or not the government has met their burden as to whether a person is guilty or not. But jurors come in depending on where you live and the kind of geographic, the makeup of the individuals that are there. A lot of people will say it was supposed to be a jury of your peers,
Right.
in your community.
Right.
And so sometimes, you'll get 90%, Caucasian, white jury pool. And if you happen to be Hispanic or black, those are the people that they call them. But if you're the minority in a particular city, you're going to get the majority of Caucasian people.
Sure.
Depending on what county you live in, and what town you live in, and what state you live in, will kind of determine the number and the racial makeup of the jurors. But what I've learned, and maybe I'm just the lone star out there, but jurors usually get it right. I mean, jurors come in, they're going to spend their time, they're going to listen to the facts, and they're not going to look and say, oh, there's a white person, there's a black person, so I have to do a certain verdict. And that's the issue that I have with some of the media out there. I was asked a question on one radio show before with regard to Jordan Davis. Why couldn't they get more black people on there? Is there not enough black people in Jacksonville, Florida?
Right.
Jacksonville, Florida has a good number of black people that are there. And that particular jury was pretty much a mix of different persons on there, black, Hispanic, white. But people most of the time won't go into a jury room saying, I'm black, I'm white. They'll actually listen to the facts, and of course jurors bring in their common sense, their backgrounds, what they know, but they'll usually listen to the facts, and if the prosecution hasn't met their burden to sustain a conviction, they're going to acquit the person. If the defense has put up a strong defense and they believe that defense, then they'll acquit.
Right.
And if they can't, figure out, both, some think that the prosecution has met their burden and some believe that the defense has met their burden, then you're going to come out with a hung jury where they can't come to a decision with regard to a particular verdict, and that's what you had in the Jordan Davis case. Some people believe that Mr. Dunn was fearing for his life. 9 people wanted to convict Mr. Dunn in the Jordan Davis case. 3 people held out and said, maybe he was in fear for his life. And if you don't have a majority, everybody believing or coming to the same decision with regard to a jury verdict, then you're going to have a hung jury.
Right. That's good stuff. Really good stuff. You had, the last time you were on our show was it last Saturday, in fact, we had a very great discussion, and do check it out for those people. The replay is on the site. You made a statement to the effect that the lady who's holding the scales of justice is sort of peeking, and she's blindfolded, sort of like peeking out. And I just want you to expound on that comment. That left an impact on me. I want you to expound on that comment in light of the discussion topic or the conversation topics we're dealing with tonight.
Well, if you go to Washington, D.C., to the United States Supreme Court, and there's an inscription above the building that says equal justice under law. And Lady Justice sits there holding the scales, and she has a blindfold on. And supposedly, Justice is blind, meaning she hears the facts, and she should be able to render a decision based on what she hears, not necessarily what she sees. And historically, that hasn't always been, true in our country, wherein that it was very rare in the 1800s into early 1900s to have a black man acquitted of a crime, especially against a white person. It wasn't going to happen. I mean, that's just the facts. We've actually executed, I believe, a 14-year-old young black boy in this country earlier on for looking at a white woman. A 14-year-old executed for looking at a white woman. So justice has not always been equal for everyone. However, as the years have passed, jurors tend to, when they hear the evidence and then apply the law to the facts, usually make the right decision. So a lot of our landmark cases that we have recently, Jordan Davis and Trayvon Martin, I've looked at the media's response to some of the verdicts, and when you listen to the jurors, some of the jurors will actually tell you that the issue that they've had is with the guidelines, and the jury instructions that are given by the judge. They have problems with, what the instructions are, and that particularly is, the law. When the judge reads a certain law and says, this is a law that you should follow, and a lot of people don't understand that, the judge will instruct you on the law, and as a juror, you raise your hand and you take an oath that I will follow that law. And the judge will actually say, do not just go on what you believe. Don't go on what you saw on TV. You can only render a decision based on the law I'm about to give you. And sometimes the law constrains jurors where they think a certain way, but the law tells them they have to do this or that. And that's why we've gotten a lot of verdicts that are inconsistent with, with what people think that their verdict should be. And if you turn on two different cable stations, one should say the person should be guilty, one should say the person should be innocent. And so I commend jurors who actually sit on these major cases because they sit there, they listen to the facts, but they took an oath to follow the law. So, for example, the Trayvon Martin case, they had to listen in. They listened to the evidence, okay, and they had to determine whether or not this person, Mr. Zimmerman, believed he was in fear. With Jordan Davis, they had to believe, listen in and see if Mr. Dunn believed he was in fear. And then the Jordan Davis case, I mean, these jurors, 9-3 for a conviction. That's the majority of the people. But under our laws, everyone has to agree to the same verdict. And so sometimes it's the actual law that's a little confusing or people don't agree with. And
right.
And you know what? I commend jurors because they don't just go on their feelings. They go on what the law is. And, whether people think, oh, there should have been a conviction on the murder case. So in the Davis case.
Right.
How can you find people guilty of attempting to murder someone, but you can't reach a decision about the actual murder of this young man? And there were actually 2 or 3 people that believed. Mr. Dunn must have believed that he was in fear for his life. I'm not saying I agree with that verdict, but that's our system. And I don't think it's perfect, but being in the system as an attorney for 14 years and trying cases, they usually get it right. I'm not saying I agree with every verdict. I'm not happy when I walk out the courtroom every time, but there are certain countries where there is no jury system.
True. Very, very true.
When you do something and someone says you did it, they take you out back and they shoot you.
Right.
So it's not perfect, but most jurors, they don't have an axe to grind. I mean, they don't want to be there, but they uphold their oath and they listen to the evidence. And it's either that the prosecutors have not brought up all the evidence that they should, or the defense has not put on a proper defense where they believe them. So in like the Jordan Davis case, there were a lot of issues, a lot of things left out in that case. Everyone's talking on the media about Mr. Dunn, who wrote these racist letters and talked about, had telephone conversations from the jail, which indicated that he was racist.
Right, exactly.
That's an issue because the prosecutors chose not to bring that up. They didn't want to make this a case about race. Is it, important? I think it probably was important, but as an attorney, we never try to judge another person that's sitting in that chair because we don't know everything. So it's easy to sit back and kind of, think, they should have done this or they should have done that. I wasn't the defense attorney, I wasn't the prosecutor. But depending on what evidence you bring on, the burden is on the government to prove that a person actually did something. And if you don't meet your burden, the law says you have to acquit that person. And so a lot of times you hear a lot of jurors once they come out, they'll say, I didn't think he was innocent, but the government didn't meet their burden. They didn't give us enough evidence to convict him.
Okay.
And that's important.
As we wind down tonight, and I know it's going to be many more appearances, we hope to have you on the show. Can you just give some take-homes for the Black Americans in the law as they go on into their daily lives? If you can give some take-homes, would be great.
Well, I mean, basically, especially for our young people, I think our older people, they face certain stereotypes and racism depending on where you are. I think they know what to do. It's our young people I'm concerned about.
Right.
Especially if there's more than one, there's this mob mentality. If there's more than one of you together, you tend to do things you wouldn't do by yourself. But there's 2 sides of it.
Sure.
I've worn a uniform before, and I've walked up to vehicles that I had to pull over. Those officers want to go home. They have wives, they have husbands, they have children. They don't know what they're walking up to every time they pull a vehicle over. And as I said earlier, most police officers do it right. On the other side, we have young people that ride around in vehicles. Again, you shouldn't be smoking marijuana. You shouldn't be getting high and driving a vehicle, black, white, Hispanic, whatever you are.
Or drinking
Or
alcohol.
drinking. And so when you do that, you are pretty much asking for trouble at that point. But I think all of our young men and women should know their rights, the basics. And that's not hard to find out. You should know, I mean, even on our website, klfoote.com, or any constitutional thing, there's a basic thing where you should know your rights. A lot of times there are some officers that will push the limit. And if they can scare you into doing something where they say, look, just tell me the truth or do this or that, then, it'll go good for you. Or if you don't tell me what's going on, I'll take your car or I'll put you in jail. And that is not necessarily true. So the officers sometimes scare people into doing things. And that's not necessarily right. But if you know the law, you know your rights, which is in this country, in the Constitution, which takes some sitting down, takes some reading, it takes some talking to. Once you know that, respectfully, you can say to an officer, no, I have somewhere to go, I don't give consent. And most officers, they'll sit up and go, yep, that's correct. And they'll let you go. If they don't have no reason to keep you, you're going to be on your way. So I think the interaction that happens sometimes is that police officers are a little nervous. The person that stopped is a little nervous. So young African American men think that every police officer that stops them wants to kill them. That's incorrect. And that every officer that pulls over, a young African American or Hispanic, they must be committing a crime. That's incorrect. And so that we have to understand, each other and who we are. And that's why I think the dialogue is important, that we need to sit down and be able to understand each other, have some cultural training. Our young people need to have some training and some understanding about when they interact with cops. Mm-hmm. So we can go back to that day when they said, if you're ever in trouble, you should seek out a police officer. Unfortunately, a lot of young men in our community that if you're in trouble, that's the last person you
That's the last person. I think I don't just restrict it to just young black people. I think it goes right up to some of our older black people too.
Oh, well, older is a little worse because older has that old mentality that no matter what, every white person is against you, and they're set in their ways. My hope is for younger people that are coming up, the younger races, that we can sit down and talk to each other so that when you encounter that person in a uniform or you encounter that person in a vehicle, we kind of understand each other. Some of the older ways you can't get out. There's nothing worse than an older black man who, came up through some of the civil rights times. No matter what you tell them, they're going to believe that white person talking to them means them harm. And you're also going to find a bunch of older white people that have come back years ago that thinks that every black person is beneath them. So unfortunately, there may not be a lot that we can do for the older generation, but my hope is for that younger generation that we can come and have a dialogue and be able to learn, speak to each other. No baby, no toddler, no young person learns racism inertly. They're not born with that. They're not born thinking black people are bad, white people are bad. That's what they're taught. And so as we move through, hopefully our younger people, especially through mentorship, to be able to mentor a person and sit down and talk to them, talk to our youth, especially in inner cities, to be able to explain to them. And also, a lot of police departments, especially in the bigger cities, will have these in-service trainings where they have cultural diversity, where they learn about different people. They'll know how to interact with people when they see them on the streets. Right. That's my hope, that we can sit down and actually talk to each other and learn about each other and learn what one person sees and what the other person sees and be able to understand where we're coming from. We can avoid some of these conflicts.
Excellent. Well, that's a good note to end off the conversation with, Ken. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. Looking forward to having you on more episodes of the Dr. Vibe Show. Before we let you go, how can people connect with you?
Well, our main website is KL Foote, so KLFOOTE, there's an E at the end of foot.com, klfoote.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. My director of communications, Carmen Colon, as you said when we started up, how I'm all over the web and everything. I have nothing to do with that because I don't know how to run the web. I try cases and defend people. But my director of communications, Carmen Colon, is responsible for that. But we're available to talk to people. We respond to emails, Twitter. We can come and talk to you, your groups. But klfoote.com is where you can reach us. For anything, whether it happens to be a case or you want to talk about a question. There are a lot of other young lawyers that are out there that we're trying to gather a network together across this country to be able to have people, not just when you get in trouble, but call and ask a question beforehand. We're always available to answer.
That's preventative. Preventative.
Yeah, I will answer a question at any time you call and you want to ask a question about, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, or my clients know you call me 2, 3 in the morning. Before you do something stupid, call me. We have our web app, which is also on iTunes and Android, the KL Foote Law Firm, where you can download that for free, and you can access that and be able to talk to us at any time.
Excellent. Well, that is fantastic. Well, Ken rocked the house as he always does on the Dr. Vibe Show, and when he's in the courtroom and outside the courtroom too. So we're really happy to have him back on. You've been watching the Dr. Vibe Show. I'm your host and producer, Dr. Vibe with the Dr. Vibe Show. You can also catch me every month at the Good Men Project. I host a monthly Google Hangouts for premium members and also co-produce them with Marie Roker-Jones. Also, I'm a regular contributor. My show is the only online show that is a regular piece or regularly featured on the Good Men Project, and they're averaging 2 to 3 million page views a week. This is something I'm beginning to read at the end of every one of our episodes, and you'll hear it more and more. So this is what we try and do at the Dr. Vibe Show. It's an environment to know and be known. It's an opportunity to serve and be served. It's an invitation to celebrate and be celebrated. And it's a place to love and be loved. So on that note, we like to say God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and always remember, you're blessed and highly favored, you're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. Take care. Bye-bye.